I'm holding a coffee cup that isn't mine. The office is empty now. Has been for hours. The cleaning crew finished their rounds sometime around 9, their cart wheels echoing down the hallway before fading into the elevator's mechanical hum. Now there's just me, sitting in this pool of yellow light from my desk lamp, surrounded by the vast darkness of cubicles and conference rooms that feel like abandoned theater sets. The cup is still warm. That's what unsettles me most. Not the name written across it in bold black marker, Adrian Hale, but the fact that the cardboard still holds heat against my palms even though I picked it up from the break room counter 3 hours ago. The coffee inside has long gone cold, bitter dregs settled at the bottom, but the cup itself maintains this stubborn warmth like it's trying to tell me something I'm not ready to hear. I set it down on my desk and watch it catch the reflection of my computer screen. The quarterly reports I should be reviewing blur into meaningless numbers and graphs. My eyes keep drifting back to that name, those 9 letters that somehow feel heavier than they should. Adrian Hale, not Elias Carter. Not my name at all. The cafe on the corner gets every order right. Every single time. I've been going there for 2 years, same order, same time, same polite nod to Maria behind the counter who knows my name without asking. Large dark roast, no room for cream. Paid for with exact change because I always have exact change. It's a system that works. Systems work because they eliminate variables, eliminate mistakes, eliminate the kind of chaos that makes life messy and unpredictable. So why is Adrian's name on my cup? I lean back in my chair and let the question settle in the quiet space around me. The fluorescent lights above make their familiar electrical whisper, a sound that becomes part of the background until you're alone like this, and suddenly, it's all you can hear. Outside, Chicago glitters in its usual way, office buildings like scattered dice across the darkness. Each window a small story I'll never know. But this story, this coffee cup, I need to understand. I think about Adrian arriving at work this morning, late as usual, hair slightly disheveled from the October wind, carrying 2 cups, because he always carries 2 cups. One for himself and one for whoever catches his attention. Whoever seems to need the small kindness of unexpected caffeine. I watched him from my desk, the way I always watch him without meaning to, as he handed the second cup to Sandra from accounting and made her laugh about something I couldn't hear from across the office floor. He has this way of moving through our office like he's conducting an invisible orchestra, drawing people into conversations, making the space feel less corporate and more human. It's the opposite of everything I've trained myself to be in professional settings. Where I build walls, he builds bridges. Where I maintain distance, he closes gaps. I pick up the cup again and turn it slowly in my hands. The marker ink is slightly smudged, as if someone wrote it quickly, without thinking. Adrian's handwriting, maybe. I know his handwriting from the countless project memos and sticky notes that cross my desk. It's loose, confident, the kind of script that belongs to someone who doesn't second-guess themselves. The realization hits me gradually, like stepping into a warm bath. This isn't a mistake. This is intentional. Somehow, someway, Adrian meant for me to have his cup, his name, his warmth pressed into my palms on a Thursday evening when everyone else has gone home to their real lives. I whisper to the empty office, my voice barely audible above the hum of machinery that keeps this building alive after hours. I swore I wouldn't do this. Not at work. Not here. The words hang in the air like confession, like a prayer to a God I stopped believing in years ago. I built my life on rules after the last time everything fell apart. After David and the whispered conversations in break rooms, and the way everyone looked at me for months like I was some cautionary tale about mixing business with pleasure. I promised myself then that work would be work, clean and separate and safe. But here I am, alone with Adrian's name written on what should have been my cup, and I can feel every carefully constructed boundary starting to shift beneath my feet. I close my eyes and let myself remember this morning more clearly. The way Adrian looked at me when he walked past my desk around 10:30, coffee cups in both hands, that small smile he saves for moments when he thinks no one is paying attention. How he paused for just a second longer than necessary, like he wanted to say something but changed his mind. The way his eyes lingered on my workspace, taking in the neat stacks of papers, the precisely arranged pens, the small cactus that somehow survived my tendency to forget about living things. Did he see something in that pause? Some crack in my armor that I didn't know was showing. I open my eyes and look at my reflection in the dark window beside my desk. 34 years old, wearing the same navy button-down I've worn every Thursday for the past 6 months because structure is comfort and comfort is safety. My face looks older in the glass, shadowed by the desk lamp, marked by years of careful control and measured responses. But tonight, holding this cup, I look different somehow. Uncertain, vulnerable in a way that would have terrified me 6 months ago, before Adrian Hale joined our marketing team and started rearranging the air around him just by existing. The building settles around me with small creaks and sighs, the way old structures do when they think no one is listening. Security will make their rounds soon, and I'll gather my things and drive home to my apartment where everything has its place and nothing surprises me. I'll eat dinner from the container of leftover Thai food in my refrigerator and watch something mindless on television until I'm tired enough to sleep without thinking. But tomorrow morning, I'll have to face Adrian. I'll have to decide whether to mention the cup, whether to acknowledge this small, impossible thing that happened between us without either of us speaking a word about it. I'll have to choose between pretending this was just a mistake, an honest mix-up at a busy cafe, or admitting that it felt like something more. Something that scares me because it suggests he's been thinking about me the same way I've been thinking about him. I finish the cold coffee in 3 quick swallows, grimacing at the bitter taste, and place the empty cup carefully in the center of my desk. Adrian Hale's name faces me like a question I'm not ready to answer, like a door I've spent years learning how to keep closed. The smart thing would be to throw the cup away, to treat it like what it probably is. A simple mistake that means nothing beyond the fact that cafes get busy and baristas make errors, and sometimes life is just random coincidence dressed up to look like fate. But I don't throw it away. Instead, I turn off my computer, gather my jacket, and leave the cup exactly where it is. Tomorrow morning, when I arrive at my desk with my usual punctuality, it will be waiting for me. Adrian's name written in marker that has somehow branded itself onto the cardboard and into the careful architecture of my thoughts. As I walk toward the elevator, I catch a glimpse of myself in the polished metal doors. I look like someone carrying a secret, someone whose life is about to change in ways they can't predict or control. The thought should terrify me more than it does. The elevator descends through floors of empty offices, carrying me down toward the lobby and the street and the drive home that I've made 1,000 times before. But something is different now. Something has shifted in the space between Adrian's name and my certainty, between the warmth of his coffee cup and the cold safety of my rules. I step out into the Chicago night, and for the first time in years, I have no idea what tomorrow will bring. I arrive at the office the next morning at exactly 7:58, the same time I've arrived every weekday for the past 3 years. The coffee cup sits where I left it, Adrian's name still bold against the cardboard, like a small rebellion against the order I've spent years perfecting. My workspace reflects everything I've trained myself to become since moving to Chicago. The desk is arranged with mathematical precision, laptop aligned parallel to the edge, pen holder positioned at a 45-degree angle, stack of project folders arranged by priority and deadline. No personal photographs, no decorative objects beyond the small barrel cactus that somehow thrives despite my tendency to forget it exists. Everything serves a purpose. Everything has its place. I am Elias Carter, and I have built my life to be unshakable. 34 years old, marketing analyst for Morrison & Associates Publishing, apartment in Lincoln Park with furniture selected for function rather than comfort. My mornings follow a routine that never varies. Gym at 6, shower, coffee from the corner cafe, office by 8. Lunch at my desk while reviewing reports. Home by 6:30, dinner from one of 4 restaurants that deliver reliably. Television until fatigue makes thinking impossible. People at work know me as dependable, professional, the person who remembers deadlines, who catches errors in presentations, who can be counted on to deliver exactly what was promised exactly when it was promised. They invite me to happy hours out of politeness and accept my polite declines without surprise. I am well-liked in the distant way that competent, undemanding people are well-liked. No one really knows me, and I prefer it that way. The decision to live this carefully wasn't arbitrary. It came after David, after the year when my life became office gossip, when every interaction was filtered through the wreckage of a relationship that should never have started. David from the legal department with his easy smile and his promises that we could keep things professional, right up until the moment we couldn't. Until I was the subject of whispered conversations in conference rooms. Until every project meeting felt like a performance where I had to prove I could be trusted not to let personal feelings compromise professional judgment. I learned then that the safest distance between work and life is an ocean. No overlap, no complications, no variables that might turn colleagues into an audience for your mistakes. But this morning, staring at Adrian's name on this coffee cup, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Curiosity about another person that goes deeper than project deadlines and quarterly reviews. Adrian Hale joined Morrison & Associates 6 months ago, transferred from the Austin office with recommendations that made him sound like some kind of marketing prophet. I expected someone slick, aggressive, the kind of ambitious professional who treats every conversation like a networking opportunity. Instead, he arrived on a Tuesday morning in September with paint-stained sneakers and a laugh that seemed to pull light from whatever room he entered. Where I am precise, Adrian is intuitive. Where I plan, he improvises. Where I build walls, he seems constitutionally incapable of understanding why walls might be necessary. He carries 2 coffee cups every morning, not because he drinks that much caffeine, but because he believes in small gestures that make people feel seen. He remembers birthdays without writing them down, knows who's struggling with difficult projects, appears at your desk with exactly the right encouragement when deadlines start feeling impossible. His workspace is chaos, notebooks covered in sketches, sticky notes arranged in patterns only he understands, a small collection of succulents that somehow flourish under his absent-minded care. In meetings, he has this way of listening that makes people feel like their ideas matter, even when those ideas are terrible. He asks questions that push thinking in unexpected directions, builds on suggestions in ways that make everyone feel brilliant. Within weeks of his arrival, he became the person everyone wanted on their brainstorm teams, the energy that made long strategy sessions feel less like endurance tests and more like conversations. I kept my distance at first. Watched him from across the office floor the way you might watch an exotic animal in a zoo. Fascinated, but certain that getting too close would end badly for everyone involved. He was warm, spontaneous, exactly the kind of person who could make me forget every lesson I'd learned about professional boundaries. But something about Adrian made distance feel unnatural. He had this way of including me in conversations without making it obvious, of asking my opinion on projects where my input wasn't required, of nodding when I made points in meetings like he'd been waiting specifically to hear what I thought. Never pushy, never intrusive, just consistently present in a way that made my careful isolation feel less like protection and more like punishment. I started noticing things I shouldn't have noticed. The way his hair caught light from the conference room windows during afternoon presentations. How his hands moved when he explained complex ideas, like he was conducting thoughts into existence. The small scar above his left eyebrow that became visible when he concentrated, head tilted slightly forward over his notebook. These observations felt dangerous because they had nothing to do with work, everything to do with the person Adrian was when he thought no one was paying attention. 3 weeks ago, I realized I was arriving at the office earlier than necessary just to watch him set up his workspace for the day. Last Tuesday, I caught myself taking longer routes through the office that happened to pass his desk. Yesterday morning, I found myself looking forward to work for the first time in years, not because of any project or deadline, but because I knew Adrian would be there, making the space feel less like corporate purgatory and more like somewhere human beings might actually want to spend their days. This is how it starts, I think, looking at his name written on my coffee cup. This is how carefully constructed lives begin to unravel, not with dramatic declarations or conscious decisions, but with small accumulations of attention, tiny permissions to care about someone in ways that make professional boundaries feel arbitrary and cruel. I slide the cup into my desk drawer, closing it with a soft click that sounds like a door opening instead of closing. Thursday morning arrives with the kind of October light that makes Chicago feel almost forgiving. I'm at my desk earlier than usual, coffee cup drawer closed, but somehow still commanding my attention like it contains something radioactive. The office fills gradually with the familiar sounds of professional life beginning. Elevator chimes, keyboard clicks, the distant hum of the coffee machine that never quite works properly. Adrian arrives at 9:15, 15 minutes later than he should, but exactly when I've come to expect him. He carries 2 cups from the corner cafe, hair slightly disheveled by the wind that funnels between buildings on his walk from the train station. He's wearing a gray sweater that looks soft enough to be cashmere, but probably isn't, sleeves pushed up to his elbows in a way that suggests he dressed without thinking about it. I watch him distribute the second cup to Jenny from Creative, making her smile with what appears to be a perfectly timed joke about our Monday morning team meeting. This is Adrian's ritual, this small kindness that starts his day, and I've been observing it for months without understanding why it matters to me. Then he walks toward my desk, and everything I thought I understood about normal Thursday mornings dissolves. He stops at the edge of my workspace, holding a cup with my name written on it in that same bold marker script. Not his name this time. Mine. Elias Carter spelled out in letters that look rushed, but intentional. "Good morning," he says, setting the cup down next to my keyboard. "I thought you might need this." I stare at the cup, then at him, then back at the cup. Yesterday feels like a conversation we had without speaking, and now he's responding in a language I don't quite know how to read. "Thank you." I manage, though what I mean is something more complicated. Something about recognition and confusion and the way small gestures can feel enormous when you've spent years convinced that no one notices the details of your existence. He doesn't leave immediately. Instead, he leans against the partition that separates my workspace from the hallway, close enough that I can smell his cologne, something clean and understated that probably costs more than he should spend on a marketing salary. "You know," he says, and his voice has that casual quality that makes important things sound offhand. "A few of us are getting together tonight after work. Nothing fancy, just drinks at that rooftop place on Madison. You should come." The invitation hangs in the air between us like a bridge I'm not sure I know how to cross. "I have early morning plans," I say, which is my standard deflection, polite and final, and designed to end conversations before they become complicated. But Adrian smiles, and something about that smile suggests he sees right through my careful excuses. "What kind of early morning plans?" he asks, not challenging exactly, but curious in a way that makes lying feel more difficult than it should. "Gym," I say, because it's technically true, even though my gym routine is flexible enough to accommodate one late evening without destroying the careful architecture of my week. "The gym will still be there tomorrow," he says. "Just one drink. No work talk, I promise." There's something in the way he says it, some combination of invitation and reassurance that makes me realize he understands my hesitation better than I expected. This isn't about networking or office politics or any of the professional obligations that make after-work socializing feel like an extension of the workday. This is something else, something that scares me precisely because it feels personal. I look at him, really look at him, and see something I hadn't noticed before. Uncertainty, maybe. Like my answer matters in a way that goes beyond polite social interaction. "One drink," I hear myself saying, and the words feel like stepping off a cliff I didn't know I was standing on. The rooftop bar is exactly the kind of place I usually avoid. Exposed brick, industrial lighting, groups of young professionals conducting elaborate mating rituals over craft cocktails that cost more than my lunch budget. But tonight, sitting across from Adrian at a small table near the edge of the roof, the space feels different. Smaller somehow, more intimate despite the crowd. Adrian orders something with bourbon. I ask for whatever beer they have on tap, because choosing feels like more decision-making than I can manage when I'm already so far outside my normal routine. Without the context of office hierarchy and project deadlines, Adrian seems different. Looser, like he's taken off a professional costume I didn't realize he was wearing. He talks about music, bands I've heard of but never listened to, concerts he attended in college, the way certain songs can transport you back to specific moments in your life with perfect clarity. I find myself telling him about the summer I spent in Vermont when I was 12, helping my grandmother tend her garden, learning the names of vegetables I'd only seen in grocery stores. It's not a story I've told anyone in years, but Adrian listens like it's the most fascinating thing he's heard all week. When he mentions that he once thought I didn't like him at all, something tight in my chest loosens. I admit that I keep walls up, that it's easier that way, and he nods like this explanation makes perfect sense rather than sounding like the rationalization it probably is. The conversation flows in directions I didn't expect, touching on childhood summers and favorite books and the small disappointments that shape adult life. Nothing profound, nothing that would seem significant to an outside observer, but every exchange feels like a small revelation about the person sitting across from me. When we finally leave, walking toward the street where we'll part ways to our separate lives, Adrian touches my arm briefly. His hand is warm through the fabric of my jacket, and the contact lasts maybe 3 seconds, but I feel it long after he's pulled away. Maybe let them down sometimes, he says, and I know he's talking about my walls, about the careful distance I maintain between myself and the possibility of getting hurt. I don't respond immediately, but later, lying in bed in my apartment where everything has its place and nothing surprises me, I think about what it would feel like to let those walls down, to risk the kind of messy, unpredictable connection that Adrian seems to offer without reservation. The thought should terrify me more than it does. The changes start small, so small that I almost convince myself I'm imagining them. Monday morning, there's a sticky note attached to my coffee cup. Nothing elaborate, just Adrian's handwriting in blue ink. Hope your weekend was good. The paper is ordinary office supply stock, the kind we all use for reminders and quick messages, but somehow it feels significant attached to my morning caffeine, like a small flag planted in the routine landscape of my day. I find myself reading it 3 times before tucking it into my desk drawer next to the cup with his name on it. Tuesday, he stops by my desk during the afternoon lull when most people are fighting post-lunch fatigue. He doesn't have any official reason to be there. No project questions, no meeting coordination, nothing that would appear on anyone's productivity metrics. Instead, he leans against my workspace partition and asks if I've listened to that band we talked about at the rooftop bar. I haven't, but I tell him I'll check them out, and something about the way his face lights up makes me actually mean it. That evening, I spend an hour on Spotify exploring their discography, trying to understand what Adrian hears in the intricate guitar work and layered harmonies. The music is more complex than what I usually listen to, requires more attention, but I find myself drawn to its careful architecture, the way each song builds towards something larger than its individual components. Wednesday, he remembers that I mentioned disliking Monday morning team meetings and makes a joke about our manager's tendency to schedule them when everyone's brain is still processing weekend recovery. It's a small thing, the kind of workplace humor that happens 1,000 times a day in offices everywhere. But the fact that he remembered what I said, that he filed it away and brought it back, feels like a tension I haven't experienced in years. By Thursday, I realize I'm looking forward to work in a way that has nothing to do with quarterly reports or project deadlines. I arrive each morning wondering what small interaction Adrian and I will have, what brief conversation will brighten the fluorescent wasteland of corporate productivity. This anticipation feels dangerous because it's specific to one person, because it makes my carefully constructed professional routine dependent on variables I can't control. But I can't seem to stop myself from hoping. Friday afternoon, most of our colleagues have already shifted into weekend mode, answering emails with less attention, making plans for happy hours and dinner dates, and all the social obligations that make up normal adult life. The office has that end-of-week energy where productivity becomes optional and conversations drift toward personal territory. I'm reviewing client presentation materials when Adrian appears beside my desk again. This time, he doesn't lean against the partition, but settles into the empty chair that I keep for visitors, spinning it slightly, so we're facing each other at an angle that feels more intimate than our usual interactions. "You always look like you're about to leave," he says quietly, his voice pitched low enough that our conversation won't carry to neighboring workstations. "Even when you're here." The observation catches me off guard, not because it's inaccurate, but because it's something I've never articulated about myself. That sense of existing in professional spaces while simultaneously planning my exit from them, of being present but not invested, engaged but not attached. "What do you mean?" I ask, though I think I already know. "Just that you seem like you're always holding something back. Like you're waiting for permission to actually be wherever you are." The words settle between us with the weight of recognition. I think about my apartment with its carefully curated emptiness, my gym routine that serves no purpose beyond burning time, my evenings spent consuming television and takeout food, like I'm marking time until something more meaningful begins. "Maybe I am," I say, and the admission feels like something I shouldn't say out loud in an office where people know me as reliable, professional, contained. Adrian studies my face for a moment, and I have the unsettling feeling that he's seeing something I usually keep hidden. Not just the careful distance I maintain from workplace relationships, but the larger pattern of how I move through life. Always slightly removed, always prepared to retreat. You don't have to be, he says. Not with everyone, maybe, but not with me. The offer hangs in the air between us, simple and complicated simultaneously. He's not talking about work anymore, not about professional boundaries or office politics. He's talking about the space between who I am and who I might be if I let someone get close enough to see the difference. Before I can respond, he reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out a small envelope, the kind that comes with greeting cards but smaller, more personal. My name is written on the front in his familiar handwriting. Don't open it here, he says, placing it on my desk next to my keyboard. Just when you get home tonight. Then he's gone, walking back toward his own workspace with that easy confidence that makes him seem like he belongs wherever he chooses to be. I stare at the envelope for the rest of the afternoon, hyper-aware of its presence among my usual work materials. It's not thick enough to contain anything substantial, probably just a note, but it feels significant in the way that unmarked packages feel significant, full of possibilities I can't predict or control. That evening, sitting in my apartment where everything has its designated place and purpose, I open the envelope with hands that shake slightly. Inside is a single piece of paper, Adrian's handwriting flowing across it in blue ink. The note is simple. There's a farmer's market Saturday morning in Lincoln Park. Good coffee, better pastries. Meet me there at 9 if you want to see what letting your guard down looks like outside fluorescent lighting. No pressure, no demand for a response. Just an invitation to step outside the careful boundaries I've constructed around my personal life. I read it 3 times, then place it on my kitchen counter where I'll see it first thing Saturday morning. For the first time in years, I find myself excited about a weekend that doesn't involve solitude and routine maintenance of my carefully ordered existence. The feeling is terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, like standing at the edge of something I've been avoiding without realizing how much I wanted to jump. Saturday morning finds me standing at the entrance to Lincoln Park's farmer's market at exactly 9 o'clock, holding a travel mug of coffee I made at home because arriving empty-handed felt wrong somehow. The October air carries the scent of apple cider and fresh bread, and I'm surrounded by the kind of weekend energy I usually observe from a distance. Couples sharing pastries, families with children who dart between vendor stalls, people who make Saturday mornings look effortless and joyful. I spot Adrian near a booth selling handmade pottery, examining a small ceramic mug with the kind of attention I usually reserve for quarterly reports. He's wearing jeans and a navy wool sweater, looking more relaxed than I've ever seen him, like someone who belongs in spaces that prioritize pleasure over productivity. When he sees me approaching, his smile is genuine and slightly surprised, as if he'd hoped I would come, but hadn't quite believed I actually would. "You made it," he says, and there's something in his voice that suggests my presence here matters more than casual weekend plans usually matter. We walk through the market together, stopping at stalls that catch Adrian's attention. Fresh pasta made by an elderly Italian woman who flirts shamelessly with every customer. Honey infused with lavender that smells like summer concentrated into amber glass. Bread so warm it steams when the baker slices it. Adrian has this way of engaging with vendors that makes shopping feel like an adventure rather than a transaction, asking questions about growing seasons and family recipes like he's genuinely interested in the stories behind what people are selling. I find myself relaxing in ways I hadn't expected, drawn into conversations about soil conditions and heritage tomatoes, topics I know nothing about, but that feel important in Adrian's presence. When he buys a small jar of blackberry jam and insists I taste it on a piece of crusty sourdough, the sweetness explodes across my tongue like a reminder that simple pleasures exist, that not everything worthwhile requires careful planning and risk assessment. We end up sitting on a bench overlooking the lake, sharing coffee from the travel mugs we both brought and a croissant that Adrian purchased from a French bakery stall. The pastry is buttery and flakes apart in our hands, requiring careful attention to keep from dropping pieces onto the walkway. "This is nice," I say, and immediately feel foolish for stating something so obvious, but Adrian nods like I've said something profound. It is, he agrees, different from how we usually see each other. The observation hangs between us, acknowledging that our normal interactions happen within the structured confines of office hierarchy and professional obligations. Here, sitting beside the lake with October sunlight warming our faces, we're just two people sharing food and conversation without agenda or deadline. But the real shift happens the following Tuesday. Chicago weather in late October is unpredictable at best. But this particular Tuesday brings the kind of sudden storm that transforms afternoon into artificial twilight. The rain doesn't start gradually, but arrives all at once, like someone turned a faucet to full pressure and aimed it at the city. Within minutes, the office windows are streaming with water, and the view of downtown dissolves into gray impressionism. Then the power flickers. Not a complete outage, but enough instability to make the fluorescent lights stutter and dim, leaving us with only emergency lighting that casts everything in an amber glow that feels more intimate than any office space has a right to be. Most of our colleagues gather near the windows, making jokes about the weather and speculating about when normal lighting will return, but I find myself standing alone by the conference room windows, watching rain turn the street below into a river of reflected headlights. Adrian appears beside me without announcement, close enough that I can feel the warmth radiating from his body in the artificially cooled air. We stand together in silence for a moment, watching the storm reshape the familiar landscape of our workday into something more elemental and immediate. "You don't have to pretend with me," he says quietly, his voice almost lost beneath the sound of rain against glass. The words surprise me, not because they're unexpected, but because they're so direct, cutting through the careful politeness that usually characterizes our interactions. "Pretend what?" I ask, though I think I already know what he means. "That you don't feel anything. That you don't care. I see you, Elias. I've seen you for months." The confession settles in the amber-lit space between us like something fragile and essential. All the careful boundaries I've maintained, all the professional distance I've cultivated, suddenly feel transparent and inadequate. He's been watching me the same way I've been watching him, noticing details and patterns and the small revelations that accumulate into recognition. "I do care," I whisper, and the admission feels like stepping off solid ground into water whose depth I can't measure. More than I should. The rain seems louder suddenly, or maybe the silence between us has become so charged that every sound feels amplified. Adrian takes a step closer, close enough that I can see the small scar above his left eyebrow, the one that becomes visible when he concentrates. "More than you should according to who?" he asks. "According to every lesson I learned about keeping work separate from everything else that matters. According to the promise I made myself after David, after months of being the subject of office gossip and professional speculation. According to the careful architecture of distance I've built to protect myself from exactly this kind of vulnerability." But standing here in the strange intimacy of emergency lighting, watching Adrian's face in the amber glow, those reasons feel less substantial than they used to. Less like protection and more like punishment I've been imposing on myself for crimes I committed years ago. He reaches toward me, his hand pausing inches from my face like he's asking permission for something we both know we want, but neither of us has been brave enough to name. Then he kisses me. It's not rushed or desperate or any of the dramatic things I might have expected. Instead, it's careful and tentative and somehow inevitable, like a conversation we've been having without words finally reaching its natural conclusion. His lips are warm and taste faintly of the coffee we shared this morning, and when he pulls back after a moment that feels both endless and far too brief, I realize I'm trembling. Not from fear, but from the recognition that something fundamental has shifted between us, something that can't be taken back or explained away as professional misunderstanding. The emergency lighting flickers once, then returns to normal fluorescent brightness, and the office sounds resume around us, as if the world has decided to continue spinning despite the fact that everything important has just changed. The next morning arrives with the kind of October clarity that makes yesterday's storm feel like something from another season entirely. Sunlight streams through my apartment windows as I prepare for work with hands that shake slightly while knotting my tie, and I realize I have no idea how to navigate a normal Wednesday when nothing about my relationship with Adrian will ever be normal again. The memory of his kiss follows me through my morning routine, the careful pressure of his lips, the way he tasted like coffee and possibility, the moment when the fluorescent lights returned and we stepped apart like two people waking from the same dream. I'd left the office shortly after, mumbling something about an early dinner, and spent the evening sitting in my apartment trying to understand what had changed and what it meant for everything I'd built my professional life around. At the office, I arrive at my usual time, but feel like I'm occupying my workspace as a stranger. Every familiar detail, the precisely arranged desk supplies, the small cactus that somehow survives my neglect, the stack of project folders that represent weeks of careful planning, seems to belong to a different version of myself. Someone who existed before Adrian Hale kissed me in the amber glow of emergency lighting. Adrian arrives 15 minutes late, as always, but today when our eyes meet across the office floor, something passes between us that has nothing to do with professional courtesy. He's wearing a charcoal sweater that brings out the green in his eyes, and when he stops at my desk with my morning coffee, the routine gesture feels loaded with everything we didn't say yesterday. "Good morning," he says, and his voice is softer than usual, like he's testing whether yesterday actually happened or if we're both going to pretend it was some kind of weather-induced hallucination. "Good morning," I reply, accepting the cup with fingers that brush against his for a moment longer than necessary. We don't discuss the kiss. We don't acknowledge the way the air between us has changed, become charged with awareness that makes every casual interaction feel significant. Instead, we move through the day like actors who've forgotten their lines but are determined to keep the performance going. But I can't concentrate. Every time Adrian walks past my desk, every time he speaks in meetings, every time he laughs at someone else's joke in the break room, I feel the memory of his mouth against mine like an echo that won't fade. By afternoon, I realize I've read the same email 4 times without absorbing any of its content. The breaking point comes at 5:30, when most of our colleagues have already left for the day and the office has settled into that familiar after-hours quiet. I'm pretending to review quarterly projections when my phone buzzes with a text message from Adrian. "We should talk." 3 words that feel like a reckoning I've been avoiding since yesterday afternoon. That evening, I find myself standing outside the same coffee shop where this all began, the place where Adrian's name first appeared on my cup like a question I wasn't ready to answer. Through the windows, I can see him sitting at a small table near the back, hands wrapped around a mug, looking as uncertain as I feel. The walk to his table feels longer than it should, like crossing a distance measured in more than just physical space. When I sit down across from him, he looks up with an expression that's part hope, part apprehension, all vulnerability. "I ordered for you," he says, gesturing to the cup waiting at my place. Dark roast, no room for cream. The fact that he remembers my exact coffee preference shouldn't surprise me after months of morning deliveries, but somehow it does. It suggests attention to detail that goes beyond casual workplace kindness, the kind of noticing that happens when someone matters to you in ways that extend far beyond professional interaction. "I need to tell you something," I say, because putting this conversation off any longer feels like cowardice. I'm scared. The admission hangs between us like something fragile and essential. Adrian reaches across the table, his fingers finding mine with careful precision. "Of what?" he asks. "Of this. Of us. Of what happens when things go wrong." I tell him about David, about the months when my personal life became office entertainment, about the promise I made myself that work would stay separate from everything else that mattered. I explain how I built my current life around avoiding exactly the kind of vulnerability that Adrian represents, how letting someone get close feels like dismantling the careful architecture of safety I've constructed over years of deliberate isolation. "Then don't let it go wrong," he says when I finish, and his voice carries the kind of quiet certainty that makes impossible things sound reasonable. "Let it be different." The simplicity of his response catches me off guard. Not a promise that nothing bad will ever happen, not a guarantee that workplace romance always ends well, just an invitation to trust that what we have might be worth the risk of everything I've been avoiding. "I don't know how to do different," I admit. "Neither do I," he says, "but I know how to try." He tells me that he's been thinking about me for months, noticing things he shouldn't notice, caring about my opinion in ways that have nothing to do with marketing strategies or project deadlines. He admits that writing his name on my coffee cup was intentional, a small test to see if I'd been paying the same kind of attention he'd been paying to me. When he invited me to the rooftop bar, when he suggested the farmer's market, when he kissed me yesterday afternoon, all of it was him trying to find a way to bridge the careful distance I maintain between myself and everyone else. I want to know you, he says. Not just the professional version you show everyone at work, but the person who tends to succulents and knows about Vermont summers and gets excited about bands he's never heard before. I want to know what you think about when you're not thinking about quarterly reports. The coffee shop around us fills with the evening crowd, students with laptops, couples sharing dessert, people living the kind of uncomplicated social lives I've spent years convinced I don't need. But sitting across from Adrian, feeling the warmth of his hand against mine, I realize I've been wrong about what I need, about what kinds of risks are worth taking. After a long silence that feels like internal negotiation with every careful rule I've made for myself, I nod and squeeze his fingers gently. Okay, I say, let's try different. His smile transforms his entire face, and for the first time since yesterday's kiss, I feel like maybe I'm making the right choice. Maybe letting someone past my carefully constructed walls won't end in the kind of disaster I've been preparing for. Maybe this time, caring about someone will lead somewhere other than professional embarrassment and months of awkward hallway encounters. Maybe different is exactly what I've been afraid to want. 3 weeks later, I find myself sitting in the same office chair where this story began, but everything that matters has changed in ways both subtle and profound. The late November light filtering through the windows carries the sharp clarity of approaching winter, and Chicago spreads out below like a constellation of possibilities I'm finally ready to explore. Most of our colleagues have left for the day, their workstations dark and silent, but I'm not staying late to avoid going home anymore. Tonight, I'm waiting. The coffee cup on my desk bears my name in Adrian's familiar handwriting, but the script looks different now, more relaxed, more intimate, like something written by someone who knows he has permission to take up space in my carefully ordered world. The cardboard is empty, has been for hours, but I keep it here because it represents something I never thought I'd be brave enough to want. A relationship that exists both at work and beyond it, professional and personal boundaries blurred in ways that once would have terrified me, but now feel like the most natural thing in the world. These past 3 weeks have been an education in what different looks like. Small changes that accumulate into a life I barely recognize as my own. Adrian and I have coffee together most mornings now, not the hurried exchange of caffeine and polite conversation that used to mark the beginning of my workday, but actual conversation about books we're reading, plans for the weekend, the small observations that make ordinary moments feel worth sharing. We've learned to navigate the delicate choreography of workplace discretion, the art of being colleagues who care about each other without advertising that care to the entire office. Stolen moments in empty conference rooms, text messages that have nothing to do with project deadlines, the careful brush of fingers when we pass documents back and forth during meetings. Last Saturday, Adrian helped me rearrange my apartment, moving furniture with the kind of casual intimacy that transforms a carefully curated space into something that feels actually lived in. He brought plants, real ones that require attention and care, not just the hardy succulent that somehow survived my years of benign neglect. My kitchen counter now holds a small herb garden that fills the space with the scent of basil and rosemary, evidence of someone else's presence in a home that used to exist purely for solitary retreat. We cook dinner together on weeknights sometimes, standing side by side in my kitchen that suddenly feels too small and exactly the right size simultaneously. Adrian has this way of making simple tasks feel like adventures, turning the preparation of pasta into opportunities for conversation, transforming cleanup into collaborative effort that somehow feels more intimate than the meal itself. 2 weeks ago, he met my grandmother during her monthly visit to the city, and watching them bond over her stories about the Vermont garden I helped tend as a child felt like watching two important parts of my life discover they belonged in the same space. Adrian listened to her with the same attention he brings to everything that matters to me, asking questions about soil composition and heritage vegetables like he genuinely wanted to understand the foundation of memories I rarely share with anyone. But the real transformation isn't in these accumulating details of domestic happiness. It's in the way I move through my days now, no longer constantly prepared for retreat, no longer holding myself at careful distance from the possibility of caring about someone in ways that make life messy and unpredictable and worth the risk. At work, I find myself participating in conversations instead of simply observing them, offering opinions in brainstorming sessions not because they're expected, but because I actually have thoughts worth contributing. Last week, I suggested a client strategy that everyone embraced enthusiastically, and instead of feeling surprised by my own engagement, it felt natural to be present in my professional life in ways that extend beyond mere competence. The sound of footsteps in the hallway pulls me back to the present moment. Adrian appears in the doorway of my workspace, jacket slung over his shoulder, looking like someone who's had a long day but isn't tired by it. His smile when he sees me is automatic now, unguarded in ways that still surprise me with their openness. "Ready?" he asks, and I know he's asking about more than just leaving the office. "Ready for dinner at the new Thai place we discovered last weekend. Ready for the book reading he mentioned wanting to attend tomorrow evening. Ready for whatever small adventure he's planned for us this weekend." Because Adrian always has plans that involve exploration and discovery and the kind of spontaneous joy I'm still learning to embrace. But mostly ready for the life we're building together, one careful choice at a time, one shared moment after another. One day where choosing trust over safety feels less like risk and more like the most reasonable thing in the world. I pick up the coffee cup, Adrian's handwriting facing me like a small daily reminder that someone sees me clearly enough to write my name with confidence, and place it gently in my desk drawer next to the original cup that started everything. Tomorrow morning, there will be another cup, another small gesture that anchors our connection in the ordinary rituals of professional life. But tonight, I turn off my computer, gather my jacket, and walk toward the elevator with Adrian beside me, no longer afraid of what it means to let someone matter this much. As we wait for the elevator, Adrian reaches for my hand with the casual confidence of someone who knows he's welcome in the space beside me. His fingers intertwine with mine, warm and familiar and exactly right, and I realize that the careful architecture of distance I spent years constructing has been replaced by something infinitely more complex and rewarding. The elevator doors open, and we step inside together, descending toward the lobby and the street and whatever comes next in a life that finally feels like it belongs to me. The reflection in the polished metal doors shows two people who look like they know where they're going, like they've found something worth keeping. For the first time in years, I recognize myself in that reflection, and the person looking back appears ready for whatever happiness requires of him.